Okay, hi, welcome everyone. This is an AfterWords event. We're here to discuss, or rediscuss, I guess, what we discussed previously, maybe bring up some different points, examine arguments that were made, and hopefully come to some sort of agreement. Not so sure that's going to happen, but
aim for the stars. You know?
Aim for the stars, and maybe we'll hit a molehill. But that's our aim. I'm Kelly Clemenson, and I am on the Believers side. And Brad?
I'm Brad Hughes, a professor of astronomy at Chaffey College for the, I guess, non-believers, skeptic side, however you want to characterize that.
And I'm not sure exactly how we're going to commence, but Brad, why don't you, if you had something that you wanted to bring up as far as what was presented last time,
why
don't you go first?
Yeah, I guess I can start. I guess the first thing I'd like to say is that, I'm hoping that this discussion, the whole reason we have this forum, is to deal with truth and facts, not hopes and feelings. And so in that vein, I think we should start with the idea that we go with what we know and with what we see and not with what we would like to believe. And I'm not accusing Kelly of anything, certainly. I'm just saying in general, a lot of the discussions I've had with people around this are about people who want to think that life can't have a naturalistic origin. Not they have reasons to think, but they would prefer to think. And this automatically sets up an inherent bias. I think it's readily demonstrable that if you look at the whole picture with convergent lines of evidence like a puzzle, it is far more reasonable to think that some naturalistic explanation for the origin of life without any form of supernatural guidance or intervention is far more likely than just to arbitrarily believe in something else that for some ad hoc reason is, we go, okay, that's why I'm going to think so. And so I think I can put that case forth pretty directly. What do you think? I think you disagree.
I do.
Yeah.
But gently. Of course, I'm on the other side. I believe that naturalism has gaping holes in its explanation of not just the idea of emotional attachment, which certainly is the case, but emotional attachment, at least for me, was not the route for me. It was to a certain extent, but I needed to be convinced. So I'm of the idea that when you consider something that is invented, it comes from genius, and genius is the explanation for complicated inventions. And that goes for physical products such as the space shuttle as much as it does for simple products like a baby carriage. And I find no reason to discount that for life.
So you think there's no way for it to arise randomly?
I think the chances against it are staggering.
Okay, but if the probabilities were to show that were reasonable, then you would accept that it could be?
Actually, Phil brought up the probabilities in this discussion last time.
Sure. But if the probabilities could be shown to be reasonable, you would go, then it could happen without any form of intelligent direction or anything else. I dropped a knowledge bomb. I'm looking at my mic going, did I do that? I'm so sorry.
Phil made my answer for me.
Was that you yelling
that
no?
No. As I said, some of it is emotional. I'm not saying that it isn't, but that would certainly give me some food for thought.
Okay, because it seems to me that, if we go, and let's say, I don't know, let's just say we're talking about probabilities. Let's talk about Vegas, right? What are the odds of winning this card game? And you go, it's 1 in 1,000, and then you win. And you go, okay, I could do that reasonably. So if the probabilities could be demonstrated to be reasonable, it seems to me that in that case you should reject any form of supernatural intervention because there's no reason to think there should be. When I drop this pen, I don't think angels are pushing on it because there's no reason to think there should be. I have explanations that make more sense.
It's gravity.
Yeah. And so I guess my point is that I think those probabilities aren't nearly as unreasonable as the people who are disagreeing with it are saying.
Okay, let me give you an idea.
Sure.
An example. In any one particular card hand, would you bet your life and your financial future on one of the card players getting a royal flush?
No, of course not. It's too unlikely.
But you are.
No, I'm not. I'm betting that over trillions of card hands being played over billions of years, that one of them came out that way. That I would bet on.
I'm just using that as an example of one.
I know, but that's
But
my
the
point, is
odds
that you're
are-
talking
the odds
one, and
are-
I'm saying it's not one. We had trillions of opportunities of chemical interactions over billions of years.
But a card game is set that somebody will get it. The card hand is set so that it can achieve that.
Right.
In other words, it's a predetermined notion that somebody could get it.
Sure. And it's also
I-
a predetermined notion that you could have the probabilities for life occurring, right? Put it a different
Yeah,
way. If we
I
had
do
something like,
believe that.
I don't know what the odds are of getting a royal flush. Any gamblers in the audience?
It's bad.
It's bad.
Yeah.
Let's say it's 1 in 10,000.
Yeah.
You go, would you bet your life on one card hand? No, of course not. But let's say I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to play 10,000 card hands. And go, now will you bet that one of them will be a royal flush? Yeah, much more likely. What if I'm going to play 20,000 card hands? Of course.
How many times can you bet everything you have?
Only once, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't bet everything we have. The early Earth had trillions of
That was-
opportunities without betting anything at
that was
all.
just-
What do
that
you
was-
mean? I don't understand the example.
Yeah, that was an
Confused.
analogy for you
Uh-huh.
and eternal life. That was a kind of an evangelistic
Oh, I
example.
thought we were
But
talking
let
about
me-
the original life thing.
Let me get
Oh, I
out,
see.
well, it was a little bit, but let me get out of that for a second.
Sure.
Let's move on to what Phil admitted to, what Phil proposed. Sorry about
sound
that.
like
That
he's a
sounded a little
criminal.
bit
What Phil admitted to.
one-sided, yeah.
Phil.
But Phil proposed. He agreed with Fred Hoyle's evaluation of first sell, and he's actually giving you much more than I would. He's giving you the first sell. So, okay, that's fine. We'll use that.
I'm sorry, could you articulate Fred Hoyle's position? Make sure
Fred
I'm
Hoyle,
understanding place.
Fred Hoyle was a
steady
British
state
mathematician,
mathematician,
right?
sure.
He was knighted.
Sure.
I don't know if that means anything, but he was good at his math. I think it means that at least.
Right.
And his evaluation on first sell to, as Phil indicated last time we talked, his evaluation on first sell to humans was 1 chance in 10 to the 40,000th
Sure.
power.
Yeah.
So let's examine that. I think we did once, but in case somebody didn't hear it. That chance setting is significantly worse than the card game by leaps and bounds of chance. That's significantly worse than picking one atom out of the known universe on your 1 chance.
Sure, of course not.
10 to the 80th is the amount of atoms in the known universe. So we're levels above that. So for your question, if you could demonstrate that there's a chance better than that, it's going to have to be significantly better, but that would change my mind. What would change yours?
I would say a preponderance of the evidence, same that it always does in science.
Is that
If you show me any reason to think a supernatural thing should be accepted rather than rejected, I would accept it.
Well,
But I haven't
Hoyle's-
seen any of that.
Hoyle's evaluation, I want to be clear what he evaluated. He was evaluating randomness versus directed. Not talking about God. He's talking about random versus directed. And if you flip the equation around, the directed side wins. Because every single chance other than the one says it's directed.
Okay, but there's a problem here. You just said yourself, Hoyle was talking about randomness. First of all, I don't know what year Hoyle did that, but Hoyle has been out of the picture for a while now. So we've had a
was-
lot of developments in genetics, biology, computational biology,
Sure.
quantum chemistry since then, which significantly alters the probability field. Further, he was not an expert in any of those fields himself.
He was an expert in math.
Yeah, but that's the problem. When Hoyle starts, I've seen this argument, when Hoyle starts talking about the probabilities, he goes, what's the probability of all these atoms combining to do this? He's ignoring things that like only certain atoms combine with certain other atoms. If I take all 92 naturally occurring elements on the periodic table and go, what's the probability of them combining to form compounds? And I just start mixing all of them with each other, I come up with this vast probability space. But that's not true because most things won't combine with most other things on the periodic table. Only a certain select subset is real. In the same way, Hoyle completely ignores that. Hoyle also ignores things like the fact that the universe had billions of years to make this happen. Oceans full of trillions, more than trillions of particles.
But that's not Hoyle's argument.
But my point
About
is
the
that
universe.
Hoyle, first of all, his probability space is wrong. And I would argue that even if you adjust the probability space for the known number of reactions, it comes out fine.
Okay, the question is what was wrong with his evaluation space?
His problem with his valuation space is that he allows for combinations of all atoms to all other atoms. He's not accounting for selectivity
Well,
in chemical
okay,
reactions.
let's assume
Most
for a
things,
second-
chemical reactions
yeah.
aren't allowed in the world, right?
Well, let's assume for a second that, and you're right, he didn't know.
Okay, so then
Okay,
Hoyle has a
but
problem here,
hold
right?
on.
We agreed on
Let me-
Hoyle has a problem?
No, let me finish. Hoyle's problem is that his calculation was favorable to you.
Favorable
Because
to me?
because he didn't know at that point, Crick and Watson hadn't discovered the DNA molecule as of yet, he had a relatively uncomplicated view of the cell.
Exactly.
He had a relatively uncomplicated. As that got more complicated, it didn't get better on the scale of his calculation. It got worse.
How do you figure that one?
Because
I'm
it's
a little
more the more
confused.
complicated you get, the worse chance randomness has of producing what you want.
Well, wait a minute. First of all,
And it is more complicated.
But you agree that
'cause-
he did not account for the possibility of selective chemical reactions. He doesn't account for that.
Of course he did. At that point,
You just told
they
me that
did-
he didn't.
No, I said that he didn't understand the complicated nature of the cell. He did understand, at least I believe. I'll have to check that fact. But I'm sure that he did believe there was some chemical reactions going on inside the cell. Because
Sure.
at that point, they did know there was some chemistry involved in the cell. They didn't know the level, and they didn't know the organization, but he knew there was chemical reactions going on inside the cell. I don't know. I'd have to check to see if he knew that amino acids were present. I don't think he did. I don't think he knew that only left-handed amino acids make up the proteins,
Sure.
and only right-handed amino acids make
Probably
up the
not.
nucleotides.
Yeah, I would
He
almost say
probably
definitely
didn't.
not. Well, given that
So
we hadn't
his-
elucidated DNA
so
yet,
his,
probably not.
his scale
Sure.
was actually favorable.
I don't think
to the
that's
side.
true. I think he's taking a bunch of random pieces, trying to stick them together and go, what are the chances of that happening? And I'm saying to you
Yeah.
that there are only so many different things that are allowed to react. If you tell me what's the probability of a bunch of monkeys on typewriters typing out Shakespeare, and you go, okay, it's incredibly remote. If
No,
we
it's
allow,
impossible.
It's not impossible. It's just
Sure it is,
improbable.
because Brad, you just introduced a coded information system that you're saying is random, the typewriter.
So
You don't get that.
why not?
Because that has coded information on it that would make up this paper.
You're telling
monkeys
me
don't- the
Monkeys can't
monkeys-
type an ordered thing by randomness.
Well, first of all, the idea
I can
of
tell you even the
monkeys-
probability of it. It's
Let me
1 to
finish.
27
Let
per
me finish.
character.
It's a purely skeptical idea, or not skeptical, but hypothetical idea.
Uh-huh.
Because first of all, you're not going to get a bunch of monkeys to sit down and type on a typewriter. They're going to destroy the typewriter.
We're kind of missing the point here,
evidenced
Kelly.
No, I'm not. You're giving me an example, and I'm going to tell you why it's wrong. First of all, the monkeys wouldn't sit down and type at the typewriter. They'd destroy it. Second of all, you don't get the typewriter. Because what you're introducing into this equation is a coded information system.
That's not
into
true
a
either.
supposed random causation. You don't get that. The typewriter is a coded information system that would produce this if you have somebody type on it enough. The typewriter, take that out and throw it away, because that's a coded information system. You don't get that.
That's
Now
also
give
not
me
true.
the chance. Yes, of course it is. That's a coded information
Okay,
system.
what if I
that
roll a die
randomness-
that just has letters on it? Does that
It's
count
still-
as a coded information?
Of course it is.
Why is that coded information to you?
Because it's what you need to produce the document that you're going to get. First of all, a dice, if you're rolling a dice and trying to produce Shakespeare, you're not going to get it either.
But you didn't answer
'Cause
my
the
question.
characters-
Why can't I
I'm
throw
answering-
why a die?
Well, I'm
Can I throw a
answering your
die with
question.
27 sides
I'm
on
answering
it?
your question.
But can I throw a
What
die
is-
with
what's
27
on-
sides on it?
What's on the sides?
A letter on each
Letters?
side.
You don't get that either.
Why not?
Because it's a coded information
What do
system.
you mean by coded information system specifically,
Okay.
please, in terms
So-
of information theory and entropy?
So information theory is this right here. Okay, and I actually sent a text to Phil that I'd like to bring into this discussion. But what I'm talking about is producing, and I brought a
Do you need to hold for the?
I brought a page in here one time that had a coded information system that I made up, and I made the point with that. But even just this simple paper with the little bit of information I had here, questions for Phil. Eliminate the relative intelligence level of the person that was making it, me, and eliminate the typewriter that I made it on. So now, what are your chances of producing this piece of paper?
I think you've got a really big problem here because I think
No,
you
I
have.
don't have any problem
Okay.
at all. You've got one because you're introducing something that's going to make it easier for the monkey to produce the papers.
Not true.
And that's, okay, who made the typewriter?
Okay, so let me try coded information. in
Who
our
made the
analogy.
typewriter?
A person did, of course.
Okay, so
but if I
you're-
randomly roll a die, that doesn't count either because somebody made a die.
Exactly.
Okay, so if
It's
I put
got
down an
the-
amino acid base, that doesn't count because somebody made the amino acid base, or are you okay with that?
The amino acid base.
The amino
if
acid base
it's-
is like the letter. Why doesn't
well,
that count?
You're jumping subjects here. Let's
No,
stick
I'm
on the
really
one-
not. I'm trying to show you your idea of coded information is vague.
You're jumping subjects.
It's
Let's go
vague
back
at
to
best and malformed at worst.
Okay, but we're jumping subjects here.
No, I'm trying to tell you that when you tell me an E in an alphabet is a coded information system, whatever that means. Of
course it
But
is.
somehow an amino acid that makes up a base
Well,
is not a
okay,
coded
let
information.
me
I
give
want to
you-
know the difference between
Let me
those
give you
two
an
things.
example.
Sure.
The P, I'm trying to point this out. It's probably not big enough.
Kelly, my vision's so bad.
Okay,
P?
mine is
Yeah,
too.
all right. P.
So it's P.
Yeah.
Is there anything about the scratching on that piece of paper that indicate that to be a P?
Other than that it's a P? I'm confused
No,
what you're doing.
your knowledge of the English language says it's a P. But nothing on the scratched piece of paper says that's a P.
Okay.
All it is a mark.
Okay.
We assign it.
So you're saying it's a
P.
signed value.
It's an assigned value, the P.
Is
It's
that what makes it
assigned
coded?
Based on us.
I'm not sure what you mean
And
by
if I
coded.
put one up here that was in Greek, I don't know, maybe you speak Greek, I don't.
No.
Most people don't think I think in Greek. But so if I put a Greek letter up here, the Greek alphabet's different. If I put a Greek letter up here, neither of us would understand what it meant
True.
because we don't have the knowledge.
So are you saying?
And my point is
what?
this, if you introduce the typewriter into the supposed random causation that you're trying to create, you're introducing knowledge into the equation because it has to be assigned. Those letters have to have an assignment to what they stand for. If you took a bunch of random scratchings and put it on the typewriter and say that the monkeys could produce War and Peace, your chances are zero.
Okay, so you're saying, and I'm still trying to get really clear
Okay.
on what you mean by coded information. You mean it's something that we have assigned a value to before we start the discussion.
You're a
Is that right? I'm a
you're-
physicist by training,
okay.
but an astronomy professor now.
I have an interesting question because I've always
Well,
wanted to.
sorry, can I get an answer to
Yeah,
mine?
okay, all right, go ahead.
Tell me, when you're saying the E on the typewriter is information, are you
Mm-hmm.
saying that that's because we've assigned it a value before we started typing?
Yes.
Okay, so are you telling me that information cannot exist independent of the people doing the thinking to assign it a value?
Yes.
Then how could DNA possibly translate information independent of any people? If everybody died today, information would
I'm
still
saying it
work.
didn't.
So you're telling me DNA didn't exist before humans showed up?
No, I'm not
Okay,
saying
that's just
humans did.
nonsensical.
Okay, well, let me finish. You didn't let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
What I'm saying to you is that someone assigned the values. It wasn't a human, obviously,
Wait, a
because
minute.
humans weren't around. So I'm saying that someone assigned the value. That's my whole argument.
Yeah, but your whole argument a second ago was that the DNA, the information doesn't have it isn't information until somebody assigns a value to it.
Exactly.
And DNA transmits information about organisms before
Absolutely
humans
it
showed
does.
up. Before
Absolutely,
humans
you're
showed up.
exactly right.
So
Me
then
and
if
you
there was
and
no one to assign
Me
the
and you,
information
Brad, are in
value.
complete agreement on that.
Okay, so then how do you get the information in
Because you're
organisms before
assuming
humans
that
are
humans
here?
are the only one that could assign information to it.
So now we need a magic creature to assign
No,
value.
I don't magic. Someone that assigned it.
Okay, but
You said magic, not me.
yeah, but let's not hem and haw. You know where
You're
we're
building
going here.
this case that actually plays right into my hand.
Uh-huh.
You're building this case that amino acids are producing code, and I agree with you, 100%. But that coded program that
Mm-hmm.
amino acids are doing is, I'm not saying exact, but it's similar to this. It's
Mm.
giving instructions to the DNA, which is a 4-code system, is giving the proteins, which is a 20-code system, instructions. And the genes in the middle, genetic coding, are the one that's translating that 4-letter code into a 20-letter code so that the proteins can understand it. Communication going on. It's the same thing. The amino acids are very similar in concept to this page. It gives instructions, just like what this page does. My point is that the only way this page came about is the only way the amino acids came about, by an instructor.
The problem is that everything you're saying violates what we know about what information theory is.
Not at all.
Yeah, it really, really does.
No, it doesn't.
I can pull an information theory textbook up and show you
okay,
that
please do.
information, if you really
Because-
want it, I've got plenty of things here. I didn't bring this one because you didn't address it in the last talk, but information can be designed as a
good,
minimization of
but-
entropy. It's very specifically. We can very specifically show you, I can show you entropically, what's called certain boundaries, where you take certain configurations, and the things that are less entropic are clearly designed to be information and not randomness. And that is a physically defined thing. I think one of the issues I regularly see with this is that I see people, and I'm not saying you, I'm saying sometimes, is that people will take things that are hard to pin down, and they'll say, well, that's where the God or whatever, the designer,
Yeah,
the
the guard of
creator,
the
or
gaps
whatever.
argument.
But more than that, they'll use words like energy. Energy in physics has a very well-defined meaning. It's very specific and quantifiable, and yet people will say, I have a psychic energy, or I feel the energy. But they do the same thing with information because it's hard to see information.
Me and you
And I
would-
think you have a malformed definition of information.
No, I
we
don't.
wa-
I don't at all. That
Kelly,
description
I'd be
that I
happy
gave
to
of-
find the computer science department
so.
for you, a textbook, and I'll show
so,
you.
because the
And so
description
the
I gave
point
of the-
is, you do not need some special external agency to design quote-unquote information. That doesn't make any
Okay,
sense.
tell me one thing on this earth that's not that way. One
The
thing,
problem is-
other than life.
Wait, that
Tell
is
me,
what?
because you're making a special example of life and manipulating it, I think, and forgive me if I'm wrong, because you have a predetermined notion that you don't want God in the equation. But you're taking life and making it to be completely separate from everything else that we see that is designed. You're telling me
Wait,
that
what do you mean by,
just
you mean designed by people?
space shuttle.
Okay, you mean designed by people, okay.
Space shuttle is an extremely
saying
complex.
structures,
Let
okay.
me
Yeah.
just get, if I need to, let me get the functional, get the term for it, all these pages that I have here. Extreme functional sensitivity, which is the DNA idea. But the other term that I was looking for is,
Functional complexity?
hold on, I'll get to it. Functional coherence.
I see.
The idea that the underlying apparatus, so to speak, I don't use a good word for apparatus, but let's assume for a second that one. The underlying apparatuses or equipment in the space shuttle is organized in such a fashion for the space shuttle to be able to do what it does. Each individual part is set apart to perform a certain function that makes a space shuttle be able to perform its function.
Sure.
And I represent life in the similar manner. Life, of course, is way more complex.
Sure.
Because if you put 2 space shuttles in a garage, you're not going to come back 9 months later and find a little space shuttle.
Not
That's
unless they're
gonna
kinky
happen.
space shuttles.
Unless something happens that I don't get, but you're not going to get that, so it's not reproductive. The reproduction part is another level of complexity that life has that the space shuttle doesn't. Now, if you try to go down the road saying that's the reason how it got to be what it is, I would disagree with that because you're inserting cause arguments into what you see as the effect.
Okay, ask you,
effect
can you
is
give me an
life.
example of functional coherence in nature, not in space shuttles?
Sure. I'm functionally coherent.
What
Sort
about
of.
an organ like the
Maybe
eye?
some of you would
Is that what
disagree
you,
with that. But
how many
being
drinks have we
functionally
had
coherent.
first?
But
You mean like organs like
I
the
don't do
eyes,
that
things
anymore,
like
but
that?
you would have a point there because 20 years ago I would be functionally incoherent most of the time. But my point is this: I'm functionally coherent in that all the parts are functioning properly. They don't function nearly as well as they used to, but at this point they are still functioning well enough for me to travel in the car, drive here and get here instructions. Like I said, maybe not as well as I used to, but it's functionally coherent in that I'm a complete whole product that functions correctly. And that's my point with life being similar to what the space shuttle is. It's a whole product that's functionally coherent that works.
Okay, so
And-
we've heard, I'm sorry, I thought you were finished, go ahead.
Yeah. So as what happened with, I'm going to divert a little bit here if you don't mind.
Okay, but I
for a
really want to
minute.
deal with the functional coherence.
Okay, that's what I'm going to
Yeah.
do. So there was a space shot. I don't know whether, maybe not all of you are old enough to be alive when it happened. I was. But there was Apollo 13 mission. There was a real famous movie. You guys have probably watched it. The mission was to head to Mars. Go to Mars. Hey, Jim, come on in. Join us. The mission was to take the whatever they had at that, the lunar lander and all the rest of it, go to Mars, or excuse me, to the moon, land, and come back. Well, as you know, about halfway through, the oxygen canister exploded, and they had to decide, okay, this mission is no longer functional because part of this whole is not functioning anymore properly. So they had to arrange things so that they could come back. So this is a planned mission, a planned event that all the functional coherence was going to get them there. Get them there and bring them back. So now the explosion's happened. Then explosion causes disorder. Once that disorder happened, now they have to figure out, okay, how are we going to get this craft back here? So did they consult the monkeys that they had sent up 30 years earlier in the Apollo 15 mission? Did they consult those, bring them as, okay, we've got this problem here, and we need you to fix it? Well, they didn't do that. And they also didn't go out on the street and gather some people out there walking by and say, okay, we've got this problem, we've got this, and one in particular was the oxygen scrubber that was supposed to produce the oxygen, and it was only designed for 2, and it was operating for 3. So they didn't go out on the street and find some guy that they didn't know. What they did was they went out and found experts that knew what the lunar lander was how it was supposed to operate, what the difficulty was, and how it was they were going to fit the module, the main capsule, I forget what they call it, but the one that brought them there that had a scrubber for 3 people, and that was supposed to come over and fit into the scrubber that was for 2 people in the lunar lander, which is where they were living. The problem is that they weren't the same. One was a circular scrubber and the other one was a square scrubber. So they knew those weren't going to fit. They had to bring in engineers, people that knew what they were doing, and evaluate the problem, come up with a mental idea of how they were going to fix it. After the mental idea, they had to evaluate what products were on the spacecraft that were going to be able to be used to resolve the problem, and then they were going to have to send instructions to the astronauts on how to build it. I submit to you that that is similar to what we have in life. We have problems that are only solved because we have functions that solve them, and the same idea behind the space shuttle having people that knew the contents of the spacecraft, understood the need presented, calculated the materials available, organized the instruction into translated instructions into, in their quote, good words, ensuring proper construction. Considering the alternatives that they considered to resolve the problem, they didn't go out on the street and get people that didn't know anything. They didn't get the monkeys that went up before in the spacecraft. They went and got people that knew what they were doing to design it. So this method is in stark contrast to the blind search option that you're trying to present that produced this functionally coherent system. And you're saying that blind searches brought us all here and were able to listen to these instructions. Blind search capabilities.
Are you finished?
I'm finished.
Cool.
Well, I'm not completely finished. I got my other stuff. But
Okay,
for
let's
that
take
one,
an example of
we're
functional
good.
coherence.
I think
The
I've
eye
bored
is the
everybody.
one the intelligent designers, all you've done is give a basic rehash of the intelligent design argument. The eye is so complex, there's no way it came about by chance. And I did this exact topic in my extraterrestrial intelligence search in my class. And I show them very clearly where there are jellyfish that have photosensitive cells that can only detect white or dark, just like the rods in our eyes, and that those are further back in the geological strata, meaning further back in history, than more advanced organisms of jellyfish, which also have the ability to show gradation in that. It's not binary, but they can sell shades of gray, which is also further back in the geologic strata than things like jellyfish that can see cones, like we have in our eyes too, that can see colors. And so very clearly, I can show a progression through the organisms chain, all the way from jellyfish until life comes out on land about 500 million years ago, and then through the amphibians, where you definitely see photosensitive cells that were simple binary on-offs to go to only see black and white, but then start seeing shades of gray further on in the evolutionary chain, which matches up with the fossils and with computational genetics now. And then I can show you organisms further on that can see color, and I can show you very clearly in the strata where these go from. And then I can show you how those work all the way up to a completely functional eye. The problem with your space shuttle analogy is you're assuming the eye, if it was an eye, would just show up. It's not true. It's like we had trillions of space shuttles, and when most of them break, most of them die. They're done. And then a few of them get a little extra tweak, whatever that would be. In our case, it would be due to random mutations. A tweak that would let them do a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. And so you put trillions of space shuttles out there for billions of years. What are the chances that one of them will be self-repaired? Of course it will be. Which is more likely, that or this analogy that I think is completely flawed, where you go, we have one shot. We don't have one shot. That's like asking, what's the probability, Kelly, that you and I are here today? It's incredibly remotely against. You and I happen to have joined this group, and before that, I happen to have moved to this area, and so did you, and before that, your parents had to meet, and before that, so did mine, and so did our grandparents. And you go, what's the probability? It's like 1 in quintillions or something, and you go, and yet, here we are. And the point is that out of trillions of possible mutations, one of them does come out to be right. And so I contend strongly that your analogy is flawed.
Well, you've ventured into something we weren't discussing.
Sure, but you're the one who's you started functional coherence, Kelly, not me.
No, I'm talking about the appearance of life.
No, you said functional coherence, which was the idea that a complex system cannot function unless it's already there, which is an intelligent design argument, which is very specifically refuted by things like what I just said.
Disagree with you.
You think the jellyfish didn't have simple photosensitive cells, or no?
No, I think they do. I just think you have a progression to where we are now.
Okay, so if I can show you enough species of jellyfish with a progression, and then going up into amphibians, and then going up into other organisms, would you believe that?
The jellyfish are jellyfish, the fish are fish, and the amphibians are amphibians. And
Yeah,
no
but you're
links
missing
between.
the point. If I produce
I'm
the
not
links
missing the
between
point,
them,
because
would you believe it?
You're assuming because of the strata that these things have developed on their own, and you assume, inserting evolution into the argument, that it's true. that's an assumption on your part that, first of all, the strata doesn't demonstrate, because the Cambrian explosion has everything, every form of life in it in supposedly this 5 million year span. So your example of inserting evolution into it by comment, it's an assumption.
Wait, so I'm a little bit confused. You're telling me if I show you a clear lineage from a really simple organism up to a more, let's say eye, just the eye. I show you a really, really simple example, something that's really easy, and I'll go all the way up to the most advanced one. And I go, which do you think is more likely, a series of random mutations, which I can generate in a computer-generated genetics program now, and you're telling me which is more likely, that or some magic director? And you're going to tell me it's the magic director?
You plug in magic into the equation.
Because that implies some form of supernatural agency.
You produced magic in your explanation. You inputted a computer into a supposed random set of examples.
Wait, the computer is just to show you going backwards that it works.
Well, you're assuming that part.
No, the
And
entire
I-
field of
okay, Brad,
computational
let's-
genomics is assuming
let's
that
agree on
part.
something, that there were simple eyes. I agree with you.
Okay, good. So we got part
And there
one.
were
That's
more
good.
complex eyes.
Good.
I agree with you on that too.
Great.
And now we have the most complex eye, supposedly, in the human. I don't know whether it is or not. But whatever the most complex eye is,
Sure.
we have that as well. Your assumption that evolution produced that is where the assumption comes in. That's speculative.
The
That's
problem,
not
no, it's not. The
demonstrated, that's
problem is that
speculative.
you're the one adding something extra into the equation by assuming somebody directing it in the first place.
I'm
If I don't see any evidence of a director, you should assume that the thing is
well,
not
you
there,
do,
not
though.
that it is.
You do, though.
I don't really think so.
You may not. Okay, let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
The example of a uncaused first cause is easy to make. You may not want to, but it's easy to make an uncaused first cause. As a matter of fact, inside the realm of time, you have to have it.
Immanuel Kant would disagree with you, and that was 300 years ago.
Okay, and somebody like John Lennox would agree with me.
Yeah, but I think we're really drifting off the point.
Well, no, you said
I guess my
uncaused
main
first
point
cause,
is
but let's
you-
let Jim ask a question here.
Okay,
because-
but we will get to this, because I want to know
Sure,
if you'll accept the
I'm
randomness
open
or
with
not.
that.
You
Sure.
don't seem to want to accept it no matter what we do.
Except what?
If I tell you that there's a 1 in 1,000 chance of this happening, I show you a clear lineage of it happening, and 1,000 times, and 999 of them don't work out, but one of them does, isn't this done?
Well,
You
no,
can't blame the royal
because-
flush on
because-
Jesus. It
because-
either happened or it didn't because of
Because you're
statistics.
assuming that there's a 1 in 1,000 chance.
Yeah,
Brad,
you're
and
missing
you
my
haven't-
point. If I show
No,
you the
I'm
probabilities, will
taking
you
your
accept
point. You
it?
said 1 in 1,000 chance, and it's vastly worse than that.
But assuming that it was
And I'll
some
take,
number, would
and
you
what I
accept
will
it?
take, Brad, is I'll take probability over possibility every single time.
So if the probabilities
So,
show
Jim,
it's good,
ask.
we're going to be back to
And
this,
we'll get
Jim.
back to
All
it.
right,
I'm-
we'll get
I'm-
back to
I'm
this.
with you on that.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
Yes, my name is Jim.
Hi, Jim.
I know I came in late on this here,
Oh.
but this reminds me a lot of somebody had approached me at one point and said, have you noticed that whenever you lose something, you always find it in the last place you ever look for it?
Right.
And now this is a definition problem, because obviously once you found it, you stop looking. It's not because of some magical, concept involved here. Now, I hear a discussion in which one person says that there was a force that brought this about, and you're describing what that force might be. I don't see a disagreement except for a definition problem, because who am I to say how God would create? Because this particular system that you're describing seems to be the best one I could think of, probably the best one he could think of, because it covers all the avenues and eliminates those flaws that he would normally make if he was just to do one creature at a time. The fact that we were supposedly selected to gain dominion, throughout history, others were selected, they fell short. Your example, that doesn't mean that we were the only ones to be selected. At the moment, we are under the spotlight. Now, that does not mean that there was no intelligent design, just because you're able to discern how it might have came about. The fact that it does come about that way takes some kind of intelligence. I don't see other than a definition problem here. I don't see you guys disagreeing on anything except for a definition.
Kelly, what do you think of that? Do you agree with that's right?
Well, I know we have a disagreement, if that's,
Right,
if that's
we
the
have a
question.
disagreement.
I think that's been demonstrated
Right.
over the last 15 minutes.
Sure.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate the question. I how do you go about answering that?
Well, can I ask you a question about
Sure,
your
go.
definitions?
Sure, go.
If you want to contend the universe is, or whatever, life origin is intelligently designed or directed, what's the difference between that and a random one where it occurred? What's the difference?
So, I'm sorry, question again, let me
Yeah,
evaluate
let's assume
it
I'm looking
properly.
at two universes.
Okay.
I'm going, one of them is designed by, or designed or directed, the way you would ascribe and think that it is, and the other one is not. What's the difference between the two in terms of what I physically observe?
Order.
So you're telling me randomness can't lead to order?
No.
Yes, it can. This is John Conway's Game of Life. It's a really simple 1970 example of a checkerboard with checkers on it. You start out with the simple dots and some configuration. The rule is if 2 or fewer dots are on around it, the cell dies. If more than 4 dots are on, the cell dies because it's overpopulated. Now, from starting with this and just drawing on the checkerboard, making random initial conditions, and you can Google this, they have all kinds of Java simulators for it now, we get insanely complex patterns like these. I have incredibly simple rules and absolute randomness. You can randomly generate this, and they make metastable structures that will exist in some cases for millions of iterations of the game board. Things that, massive structures where these whole things have some kind of chaotic stability to them. This question of whether or not randomness can lead to order was settled in 1970 by John Conway. This is done. This is not, I mean, and again, I mean no disrespect to you, but just because you don't know it doesn't mean it's not true.
And just because you're proposing it doesn't make it true.
John Conway proposed it, and it's been
John
verified
Conway,
for
I
50
don't know.
years. It's not me. He was the mathematician.
Because I would look it up.
My point is, if you look up Conway's Game of Life, you'll see, not the game with the board game where you sell your children for the car. The other one, where you have little simple initial conditions, like a checkerboard with pieces on it, and you're allowed to surround it with other little pieces, so there are 8 possible squares. And that's the only rules. If it's 2 or fewer, it dies. If it's more than 4, it dies. If it's blank and there are 3 cells around it that are filled, it'll pop on like it just became alive. That's it. That's all the rules. The rest of it's random. Populate the board randomly. You will see giant ordered metastable structures. In some cases, it can last for millions of iterations of the game that make these big systems and everything else, gliders, glider guns, all kinds of things. And so I'm telling you that that is true. I
Well,
suggest strongly that you
I
go look this
haven't-
up because,
I'm gonna look
but
it
the
up.
question that somehow you can't generate order out of randomness is simply not accurate.
Well, I disagree with you, and
Tell
I will look up
Conway.
Mr.
Okay.
Conway.
Doctor
But he's not the
Conway.
ultimate, but I wish I had a pen because I like to write down. Can you write down
Sure.
that name so I look it up?
Dr. Conway, C-O-N-W-A-Y. And it's just Game of Life. Yeah.
Brad, I'll look it up. I look
Sure.
up stuff just like when
Yeah.
the last
Of
event
course.
happened last week. Gentleman by the name of Troy
Oh,
came
Troy.
up with the dog
Troy.
bear thing.
He's good, yeah.
And it turned out to be a farce. There's no bones for the dog thing.
Troy's a
But-
very knowledgeable individual. Yeah.
Well, he might be, and I'm not saying that he wasn't, that he didn't, he doesn't have brains. Of course he does. He is a knowledgeable guy, smart guy.
I
But
have
his
a
example
question.
was a bad one, because there's no bones for the dog. But I'll look this up. But I submit to you that John Lennox, not Penrose, but I can't remember the guy's name. Penrose. But even Hawking and Penrose say that the universe had a beginning. They admit to that. Not admit to it, they state it. And they have their own examples of how that beginning began. But just because I don't happen to know who John Conway is, there's lots of things I
Okay,
don't
but
know.
of course,
Okay,
we all do,
and-
right? It's all a learning
okay.
process. But let
And
me
my
ask you,
point is
if I
this,
could
if-
show you, if Conway demonstrates
I'll look it
order.
up.
No, I want to ask you though, if
Yeah.
you do look it up and you go, yeah, that does work, because you can easily do the game online, it's really easy. Will you then accept that order can come from random conditions?
No.
Well, sir, Kelly, I'd very much like your
look at it,
response to
yeah.
this. Will you accept that?
I'm not saying that randomness can't create what is the term for it? Can't create non-coded information. I'm not saying it can't. I'm not saying that randomness couldn't produce the P that I was talking about before.
I'm not
To
sure
give
what
it
you mean.
to the P.
Oh,
I'm not
I
saying
thought
that
you meant
randomness.
the little P.
I'm not saying that
Like-
randomness couldn't create the P. But it doesn't give it meaning.
I-
And I'll look up Conway. I'm not saying that.
Sure.
I'll
But
look it
I
up
think you
because
really should consider
I will.
this, 'cause it
I
matters.
look stuff up. I looked
Yeah.
up the dog bear thing last week. I look up what Phil tells me, and I evaluate it. And I have yet to find a single example of where those things are an avenue towards life. I haven't found a single example of it. And I've heard lots of them, but I haven't found a single example that leads to life.
I have seen the progression in time lapse, and it actually looks like battles going on.
Yeah, I wanted to print off a bigger one that had like the whole grid, but I couldn't find one that was good. It has all kinds of.
However, once again, I'm not clear. Are you saying that this intelligent design was created out of randomness, or this particular design was the result of somebody trying different rules and found one that was self-perpetuating?
Neither. I don't think it's an intelligent design at all.
Because I know that he has tried other combinations,
Sure.
and they were not self-perpetuating. The particular one that you're citing now was one that was.
Okay.
And it's fascinating the way that, if you look at it in time lapse, it really does look like two camps
Yeah, you
or
see like
more.
things moving back and
They
forth,
battle
and hitting each other
Mm-hmm.
and doing all kinds of stuff.
However, you start off by saying this intelligent design created a condition in which randomness had this result. And I'm just wondering, did you miss that? That was your statement, wasn't it? That this particular intelligent design produced a random result.
To be clear, I'm saying that if you're saying the game was designed by somebody, of course it was.
No, the rules.
The rules
period.
themselves were designed by somebody, yeah.
Because when you deviate
But I don't
from those
see that
rules,
necessarily carries over to someone else.
when you deviate from those rules and you make them other than, he had problems making them self-perpetuating.
Okay, I'd like to see some examples of that one. But
Look,
I
no,
guess,
it's the same guy.
yeah, I'll look that up. But I guess my point is then, I asked you a few minutes ago what the difference was between an intelligently designed universe versus a random universe, and you said order. That's what you said. And I said you can definitely
Like
have
what we
order
have in
come
this,
from randomness.
like what we have in this universe order.
Right, and I'm telling you that you can definitely have order come from randomness, which was where this came up. And so I'm
Well,
telling
I
you now
haven't-
there is no
as
difference between those two. You can't tell
Well,
the
that's your
difference.
statement. I don't agree with it, but I have to check it out.
Sure, but
You-
then so what would be
you
the
present
difference
it-
then other than order?
There isn't any.
Okay,
And
so
you
if
present-
if this goes, then your theory
You present that
falls.
to me, which the gentleman Jim says that this was a designed experiment,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of his examples didn't work, and this one did. I don't know. I can't comment on it because I don't know. There's lots of things I don't know. But what I do is once I've presented with something, then I look it up. So
Sure.
I can't answer your question because I'm not familiar with the situation, and there's lots of things I'm not familiar with, but I'll examine it.
Yeah, we're all in
And
the same boat,
unfortunately,
right?
we can't do afterwards.
Afterwards, oh, Phil.
5 or 6 afterwards. So I honestly, I don't know. I can't answer that because I've never heard of it.
I have a question for Kelly, I
Okay.
guess more than anybody else. But do you see any difference between organic and inorganic? I mean, you're talking about a space shuttle, that's inorganic, but you're talking about people and animals. That produces at a different kind of level than what we make with our hands.
Oh, I agree.
And
They
as
can
far
be
as
productive,
monkeys being able to type on computers, they've been able to do that for a long time. When you teach them, they can definitely type and communicate, and they don't tear it up. And you can put a bunch of them together, and they'll punch food. I want banana, and I want fruitcake, or whatever they want. But, I'm begging to differ. I
Okay,
guess.
well, as far as monkeys being able to learn how to request food, sure. I'm not. What my point with that was that the example given of introducing a typewriter into a random experiment isn't random. That's
So
you're
what does count as
introducing-
random?
You're introducing an intelligently designed product.
Okay, then give me a
into
random
sym-
one.
The monkeys without the typewriter.
The monkeys have to be able to
Producing War and
produce
Peace.
something.
Producing War and Peace.
Yeah, but the monkeys have to be able to produce something, right? If you're going, well, how are they going to produce War and Peace? Are you saying they can make
I
random
would-
sticks? Does
Actually,
that count?
what I would submit to you is I'm going to take away the typewriter and say, okay, how do they produce War and Peace? I think if you're honest, you're going to agree with me. Their chances are 0.
I can't figure out how they're writing letters without a typewriter.
Oh, I agree.
But you're
that's
making an
what-
example. I'm asking you then, if
You-
typing on a
Brad,
typewriter
you
doesn't
brought-
count as randomness, what does?
Brad, you brought up the example of the monkey with the typewriter.
Sure, but then you
And
tried
I'm-
to take it down. I don't think you really
I am
succeeded.
taking it down because you're introducing a designed product with a coded information system on it and calling it a random experiment. It's
Then
not.
give me an example of a random thing.
A monkey producing War and Peace without the typewriter.
What, you mean with a stick? Does he write? I don't understand what you mean.
Me and you are equally incredulous about it, Brad.
No, I'm asking you. I'm not incredulous. I believe it just fine. I'm asking you,
You
what
think
is
that
the
a monkey?
example of the
You think that a
experiment?
monkey without a typewriter can produce War and Peace?
With what? A stick? A pencil? What are you talking about?
Whatever he wants to use.
Okay, so let's say he just has sticks and he throws them at the ground.
Okay.
Okay, so he throws
Is he gonna
enough
produce
sticks.
War and
Some of them
Peace?
end up becoming E's. Some of them end up becoming A's.
And who's evaluating it?
So we're back to this thing again
Well,
about you saying
okay,
information
let me-
has to have
let me make-
meaning and it
Let me
doesn't.
make that a little bit more clear.
It just doesn't.
We're going from the origins of life. That's what our entire discussion is here.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that a bunch of monkeys could pick up some sticks, throw them on the ground, and produce war and peace.
Give them 3
Let me
billion
ask you
years
this-
and several trillion monkeys? Sure.
No.
Let's go back to organic and inorganic.
Okay, let me answer the question. Then, yeah, let me answer his question. You're assuming a few things. First of all, you're assuming a human's there with intelligence enough to read what this monkey's thrown on the ground, and it's could produce war and peace. I assume that you think monkeys came around first, and then humans came around later, so there's another error in your argument. But the idea that monkeys could pick up a bunch of sticks and produce war and peace, is there, like Hoyle evaluated 1 chance in 10 to the 40,000th? I guess.
So I'll ask
As
you
I said
again, what's a
before-
random
as I-
process?
As I said before, I'll bet my money on probability as opposed to the 1 chance in 10 to the 40,000th, which I imagine would probably be about the same as what your proposal is.
Okay, but
I don't know because I'm not a mathematician.
Sure.
But the odds against what you're proposing are astronomical against it.
First, I wish you'd quit using the 10 to the 40,000 because we just talked about how Hoyle was doing this before we even discovered DNA. Do you think we've made advancements in biochemistry in the last 70 years that
Sure,
would
we
bring
found-
down the size of that probability space?
No,
Of
I
course
think it's going to make it worse.
We haven't?
No,
Of
I'd say
course
with
we have.
the evaluation of
Yeah.
the complexity of life, of course it's gotten more detailed.
Okay.
But that doesn't reduce the numbers, it makes them worse.
Okay, let me give you a really easy example of what you're talking about in a smaller context other than a cell,
Mm-hmm.
but in a biological thing. RNA, tRNA, is on the order of 100 bases long, right? If I throw amino acids, nucleic acids, what's the probability of this stuff becoming tRNA? It has to be just right, and there's this many molecules, and it's so many, and it's 100 bases long, it takes a long time. There's no way that could ever actually happen randomly. Hold on.
Yeah.
But we do it in the lab all the time. We do it by taking Merlionite clay, which would have been found on the primitive Earth. We put the nucleic acids in the water, and we wash the clay over and over, just for literally a few, I don't know how it takes, I think it takes a couple months. And they're done, and sure enough, here comes this nice long molecule. Because you aren't counting for the fact that once something is created, it becomes stable. There's a stability pattern here that once you get 2 of them together, the third one just links on, then the fourth, and the fifth. And you're acting like they all just have to randomly pop together. That's not true. Once you get the first, it's easier to get the second, and the
So-
conditions cut down the probability space.
So in your soup,
Mm-hmm.
is there right and left-handed amino acids there? Or are you just
Probably gonna be
putting in?
lefties.
So you're sorting them already and making lefties.
And so you're concerned about the chirality of the molecules.
I'm saying that you're sorting them before you put them in. You're saying, okay, I'm only going to put right ones in there.
No, you can have the soup have both. That's fine.
Okay, so
Let's
RNA is
start
only
off.
right-handed.
Okay.
Wait,
So
I have
you're
a
sorting
question.
out the left. Yes.
What you described
She looks
was
so
a
happy. Hi, how are you? She's like, I gotta talk.
Oh, okay.
Hey, how are
So
you?
what you described by being in a lab and creating this this sort of experiment, you are the creator in that case.
Sure.
So why is it so far-fetched that there was somebody above the earth moving the water and getting things started?
There is. It's called the moon. It makes tides. I'm serious.
And,
I mean,
well,
don't know
I
just
understand
for
this, but
God,
then
you know.
who put the moon there and put the
Yeah,
earth
now we're back
so
into an
near
infinite
to it?
regress problem, which is a lot different. You go, what
So,
makes the first
well,
creator?
what I'm trying to say is that
Yeah.
you started your illustration by
Yeah.
we were in the lab, so
Sure.
it wasn't random at all. So
Yes,
you
it was.
can't-
We
you
just
can't
took
use-
nucleic acid and sloshed them on there. We didn't sit there and say, go over
But
there.
you're not random.
But hold on, I think we're a
So-
little bit confused about randomness is. Is the experiment randomly throwing nucleic acids on the Merlionite clay?
But you're basically saying the only thing that matters is what's in there, and nothing caused it, but you did cause it.
Okay, so in your analogy with the natural world, what caused the tides?
You're getting outside of your analogy. My question was, weren't you creating your experiment, or isn't
My
that
point-
experiment created?
We're running off a slippery slope here. The experiment recreates the
Your
physical
argument is
conditions
a
on the
slippery
early Earth.
slope, is what I'm
Not
trying
at
to
all.
say.
Okay, the experiment recreates the conditions on the early Earth. Okay? If those conditions exist and show that just by using waves, we can do the same thing that happened on the early Earth, haven't I shown that I don't need somebody to go, you go here, you go there?
But you need somebody to show that. You
Why?
keep saying we don't need somebody, but you do.
What do you mean? I don't
In
understand.
your example, you need somebody to create that example.
You mean create the Earth?
I'm talking about your specific example about
Yeah, but,
swishing
all
water.
of my example is clay, waters, and sloshing. What are you talking about?
But you put that together. or
Okay, so the
whoever-
Earth was here. Are you saying the Earth had a creator before it?
Absolutely.
Okay, and where did the Earth come from?
The earth came from God, is
Okay.
what I'm saying.
And I'd say that that's a little bit ad hoc, just to go, oh,
Well,
okay, it's God
I
from.
understand that. You also used a very random thing with the monkeys creating War and Peace.
Sure.
How is that more acceptable to you than a God being there?
Because for one thing, I don't have to postulate the existence of extra entities to generate it my way. There is no, I asked this question before, I'm still not getting a clear answer. What's the difference between a randomly generated system with the universe and one that was created or designed or guided? And the answer was order. And I said, here's an example of order coming from randomness and initial conditions. And you said, I'll go read that. Okay. But my point is, if you can't clearly delineate the experience between what's intelligently designed and what's not, you don't have a science at all. You don't have a science if you can't give me an experiment to
That's an
demonstrate.
assumption on your part, Brad.
No, it's not, because it's Karl Popper's criterion of falsification that made the assumption.
You're making an assumption based on that being true. I haven't read that.
Okay, but
Again,
then we'll go look that up sometime. We'll do the
We'll
AfterWords, the
that's
sequel.
fine.
But my point is that other than that,
After I look that up, then I'll be able to intelligently comment on it.
okay, but
I can't
then,
intelligently comment on something that you're proposing
Sure.
that I haven't heard before.
okay. Well,
So my answer is
go ahead.
ordered, and that's the
But
answer.
I'd like to get back to what I was discussing with the development of tRNA. My point is, if you look at tRNA 100 bases long, and you go, what's the probability of this stuff randomly occurring out of a bunch of nucleic acids?
and
You go, it's incredibly small. But I can do it very easily. If it's so small, how am I generating it in the lab? If it's so impossible, how am I doing it? That's like saying you can't get a royal flush, and I keep popping down royal flushes. Yes, I
How
can,
many
so you're
times are you
wrong.
going to pop down royal flushes in a row?
That's the whole point, is because that is improbable.
But
But what
you know,
I'm
that's-
doing
I'm
is
just-
happening.
I'm just commenting on a comment you made. But again, the proposition you're making, first of all, you're I don't know, the soup.
Yeah.
My question is, what's your soup?
The
That
soup
you're
is-
supposedly this
Macromolecules,
magic thing
things
of
like,
water
water,
sloshing
methane, ammonia, hydrogen.
Okay, what's the amino acid makeup?
Okay, the amino acid comes from, the Miller-Urey experiment.
Sure.
You know this, we've already discussed this, was in the last
Miller
one.
and Urey admitted that didn't have anything to do with the formation.
Okay, that was because later on, Miller found out that the early formation of the amino acids didn't follow because the early primordial conditions weren't the same. Bada was Miller's graduate student who is now at UC San Diego just like 15 years ago and produced it using the known numbers, and it's actually higher, not lower, than what Miller
Well,
had.
but
Over
amino-
200
creating
different
amino acids, which me and you agree that he did,
Okay, so we got
in
that.
an experiment
Yeah.
that he took out a lot of conditions in the early Earth that he supposed, because he needed them to make up his experiment to make it to work. But my point is this: he produced both right and left-handed amino acids.
Okay,
You know the proteins are only made up of left-handed ones.
that's true.
And you know that nucleotides are only made up by right-handed ones.
Sure.
So you're flipping a coin, and let's say your 100 is the average of the mix that you have that are both right-handed and left-handed.
Mm-hmm.
You're telling me that you're flipping a coin, heads and tails, and it's coming up heads every single time.
Okay, so wait,
You know what
sorry,
the
I'm
odds
sorry, I
is?
have to
Let me
address
just
this
finish.
because he addressed this
Let me
in the
just-
last video.
Let me just
so,
finish.
Yeah,
That's the odds that you're
Okay.
getting. Because they'll bind, right and left-handed amino acids bind just as well either way.
sure. So let me,
And
if I
you're
may
telling me
clarify
that
for the camera.
now
what you're
we're
talking
going
about.
to now we're
Yeah.
going to have the 100 coin tosses in a row coming up tails.
So chirality is the idea that molecules can occur in handednesses, like a left or a right-handed. And so like the left hand, all the amino acids are all lefties, right? And you
Well,
go,
in
oh, I'm sorry,
proteins
proteins.
they are.
Proteins are all lefties. And you go, how can that possibly be? There's no way that could happen. Or at least
happens.
it's very improbable, right?
It
That we would just
happens,
randomly
but
have that happen.
minus sorting.
Okay. And so are you familiar with what's called a glycine catalyst?
No.
Okay. Scientists at NASA back in 2004,
Are
I
you
can
writing
give you
this
the
stuff
actual
down,
paper.
Elizabeth? I don't have a
Glycine catalyst is what it's called.
without it.
I can find you the actual paper, I have it here, where they actually show that once you get some of the nucleic acids start forming lefties and make proteins, the rest of them all get catalyzed by it. It's like they all follow the leader.
but you
This
jumped-
reduces your probability. You're saying that it's not
No,
randomly
you-
going to happen.
You just made a massive quantum leap. You said once the protein is formed with lefties, then glycine reacts. You,
No,
you
that's
made a
not what I'm
quantum-
saying.
You made it, well, that's what you just said.
I'm telling you
made
that
a
no.
quantum leap.
I said once the
from-
nucleic acids start forming a protein, the rest of them lock into line and all the lefties automatically come into line,
Well-
like playing Follow the Pied Piper. And I'm telling you, once again, I have reduced the probability space without resorting to supernatural things, without resorting to a designer or anything else. And I keep asking you the same question. I don't keep quite getting a clear answer. How many times do I have to reduce the probability space before you go, hey, maybe it isn't that number, maybe I'm wrong?
You haven't reduced it yet.
I haven't? Really? The chirality? I just solved the chirality problem, and it's
No,
not
you-
going to...
no, you didn't
Really? I
solve
just
the
told you that
chirality
when the
problem.
left-handed nucleic acid pops up, the other lefty nucleic acids start automatically linking in with it because of what's called a glycine catalyst,
you
thereby
just-
making left-handed proteins, not randomly, but
You
using
just
a linking
reduced,
structure.
so you just reduced the sorting process to only left-handed.
Exactly. No, actually, nature did it. I'm just telling you about it.
Nature did it.
Yeah, do you want me to show you the article?
Nature flipped the coin how many times?
Nature
With a-
flipped the coin.
How many
and-
of the
wait a
amino
minute.
acids
Nature
started
flipped the
lining
coin and
up?
said when it's heads on the first one, the second one will be heads, and so will the third one. Nature's rules did that for you.
So there's an experiment where you only get heads.
Yes. I just told you, a
You know,
glycine
if somebody-
catalyst,
if somebody
NASA
was doing that to
2004.
me, if I was standing in front of someone and they say, okay, let's bet $5, and I'm going to bet the next 50 times that the coin's only going to flip to heads, and it started doing it, at some point, Brad, would you say, I want to look at the coin?
Yes, why? Because the coin would be loaded. The
Yeah,
laws of
I-
nature aren't
that's
doing what
my
you're saying in
point.
the analogy. The laws of nature are just doing what the laws of nature are
You're
doing.
making up a loaded.
I'm not making anything.
system.
Nature's the one that does it. I didn't do it. I'm not the glycine
No,
catalyst.
no,
I didn't make them
You're
left-handed.
assuming nature is putting together these only right-handed.
I'm not
amino acids
assuming it. It's
left.
in an observation in the lab. It's also been observed directly in meteorites. I have the paper. I have so many papers. I can pull it. It's right here. I
No,
printed it out
meteorites
right
have
with me.
both left-handed and right-handed.
I'm showing
amino
you that
acids.
glycine catalysts produced under the similar conditions to what were found in the early Earth. and
Writing
in
this stuff
meteorites.
down, Elizabeth?
You're right. Will produce, in this case, once the first nucleic acid's a lefty, the rest will play follow the leader and do the same thing. The lefties will bind, the righties won't. And I'm telling you then that I said, you want to make it random. Oh, lefties, righties, let's make them random. I'm going, we have just cut down the probability space, not by a designer, just by that's the rules of the world. If I let go of this pen, I go, stay here or fall down, stay here or fall down. You go, what are the chances it falls down 100 times in a row randomly? It's not random.
That's
It's
'cause
just
of-
the laws of the universe.
It's the law of
It's not
gravity,
random. Exactly.
which
And
me and
this
you
is a
agree
law
on,
of
Brad.
biochemistry.
I,
And so I'm
Again,
telling you.
I
But
have
again,
to
I
read
keep
it.
saying, okay, and I'd like to know how many times I have to cut through this
give
probability
me
space.
your
for-
email address and
Sure.
we'll discuss it.
But again, I'd like just to know, ideally, if I can cut the probability space down to a
If.
reasonable number, of course, because I want to be fair, of course, I could always be wrong. But if I could show you through selective chemical reactions, selective hybridizations in biochemistry, glycine catalysts, just like I just showed you, each one of these moves cuts the probabilities down further and further and further. And so when you keep saying these biological things can't happen, and I keep making them happen, then you can't keep saying, well, that's so unlikely. That's like saying, I keep getting the royal flush, and you keep going, that can't happen. Well, here it is.
no, I'm
You
saying
can't
if
count
you
what
kept
can't happen
getting
if
the
I'm
royal
doing it.
flush over and over again, I'd check the card deck.
Right, because maybe the cards don't follow the rules you think they do.
No, I check the card deck because it's supposed to be random.
Yes, but that's the whole point. That nothing, it's not truly random. Hoyle's idea was throwing random things together. It's not random. There are selective rules about how things combine in chemistry to biochemistry to what we're seeing now with glycine. You couldn't have known that in the 1940s. And so Hoyle makes a rule of just everything combines. I go, that's just not even close to an accurate representation. It ignores all kinds of things. And so every time it makes a selective reaction, it goes, that cuts down the number of possibilities you can deal with. And in cutting it down, which is more likely? That I have to keep resorting to some intelligent designer, whatever that may mean, or that maybe it really is just that you don't want to accept that it's random and you
Or
don't
maybe
like it.
or maybe that you're making the stuff up because there's
You're
plenty of
making up NASA's article? Is that
No,
what it is
there's
now?
plenty
I'm
of
making up John Conway? Is that what
no,
it
there's
is now?
plenty of articles by mathematicians
Oh,
that
come
say the odds against it are staggering, and it's not.
Would you like to
just
cite
Fred
some?
Hoyle.
Because I brought papers. Would you
Sure,
like to
Lon.
cite
John
some?
Lennox is
Okay,
one.
so give me a specific.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I go way back,
Yeah.
way back when I came up here. You were discussing whether these formations of these building blocks that how it theorized took place.
Sure.
Because we're all blind. We're all blind men feeling the tail of an elephant. We're making games from it. I find it fascinating. Once again, it's that last place I looked, I found what I lost. I find it fascinating that these particular building blocks are found even on meteorites. Now, if it was truly random, then you would have an absence of them rather than an abundance of them found in everything. Because what it looks like now is the seeding took place, the rules were set forth, and you're saying as soon as we find out how a mechanism works, then that takes away the possibility of it being planned. I don't understand that. Maybe you could explain that to me. Once you find out how a mechanism works, how does that predetermine that it could not have been planned? Because if it was truly random, what are the chances of those particular building blocks forming right at the time that it needed to here on Earth? Obviously, the chances were those building blocks are found together everywhere.
So I
So-
think your question to me is if I
If
make sure
it
I'm
was
reading this right.
randomness, then there would not be this situation in which it had to form. You would have the situation in which it would be moot because it didn't form, because all the pieces weren't there.
I'm sorry, I'm a little
So
confused
my
on what you're
question is
asking.
because you determined how a mechanism may have happened, how does that preclude the fact that it may have been planned to happen?
Oh,
And the fact that
sure.
if it was truly random, then those building blocks would be absent in great spaces because, I mean, it's random everywhere. But yet they're found even on meteorites and samples taken from the tails of comets. How would that be that those building blocks would be present everywhere? That we looked. Once we found out what they were.
Okay, so I think I'll address your first question first. Does the idea that once we find a mechanism for something preclude the possibility of something creating that mechanism? Of course not. I'm not commenting on that. We're talking about science. The question was how life showed up, not whether or not somebody, we might be talking about whether or not somebody's needed to design it. But the idea, because it's, we have a mechanism, there can't be something that designed the mechanism. I don't see that as, I didn't comment on that. You were trying to show that something needed to be designed, that it couldn't be generated randomly. I said, that's not true. I will show you how it can be generated randomly. Once you get that, you go, well, did God now create a random universe? I'm a scientist. I'm not dealing with that question. But I should answer the more important point that why should I assume that there is a God that designed the universe? Why not the Great Pumpkin? Or why not Santa Claus? Or a ham sandwich? Well, I can use anything I want, and Zeus. And now should I be taken with the same gravity and respect? If you want to be clear about this, let's be clear. If you're going to say something guided it, I can say that it was, the ghost of my dead uncle for all I care. It doesn't matter. And so I don't really think that statement has much content, import, reliability, testability, and the honest to God truth is that I think the reason we're still fighting this issue after 150 years is that people don't want to admit they want in their mind to make purpose where there isn't one. They need it. They crave it. They can't accept it. And that's what's really going on here. I can present you with 100 examples, and it's not really going to change much because people don't want to admit that things can just happen. Life's random. We have to deal with it. That's the reality. And I'm sorry, but that's the truth.
That's your opinion of the truth, Brad.
Sure, but I mean, I know
you
that.
made just lots of sarcasm. Which
No, I mean, I'm trying to be real with you
You
here.
want to be sarcastic about who God
sarcastic.
is. And yeah, you were. 'cause
Why
you
is
said
that
the
being
Great
sarcastic? Why is
the
that
Great
so
Pumpkin?
wrong? Yeah, sure.
Really? You think I
Why
believe
is
in
that
the Great
sarcastic?
Pumpkin?
Sure.
You think I believe in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy?
I don't know.
There's no evidence for it. Would you really invite me here to an intelligent conversation if I believed in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy?
Well, to be precise, I
Would
didn't
really-
invite you.
Would
He
Phil
did.
have?
That's up to him.
Yeah.
My point to you is
Would
that
you be sitting here talking to me if I believed in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy?
I deal with it every day.
The uncaused
Sure.
first cause is not some fairy tale. Uncaused first cause is something that lots of cosmologists agree on.
Come
An
on,
uncaused
please
first
quit
cause.
just resorting to
It's-
other people
we're
think.
resorting. You can resort,
You
but
know,
I
no.
can't, right?
No, I don't
You
resort.
can
I
resort
cite
to this
sources
guy.
with
Yeah,
scientific
well, I
experimentation.
don't have
You
the
just say
sources, but I
they
can get
believe
them.
in it, and I think it's the same thing. It's not the same
I
thing.
wasn't.
Well, let me be clear again. I don't mean to insult someone, but I do mean to say honestly
Well,
that if you're going to say
when
it's
you
some
s-
designer, you can use any designer you want, and it's the same content of import. You can say it's a great pumpkin outside the universe, and it is no different than what you have just said. You can use first cause, uncaused, all you want, make it sound like a Greek philosophical issue, and
not
I can say
philosophical
it's a
at all.
pumpkin, and it's the same
It's not
import.
philosophical at all, Brad. Inside the realm of time, it had a beginning. And if you want to propose what Hawking did with his 10 to the 500 different universes to try to
Sure.
explain the ordered nature of this one, go ahead.
Yeah,
But
we
that's
can do
still
that.
an uncaused first cause.
We can still dance around all
Yeah,
the
we can
original
dance
origin.
around
We can
all
do
we want
Kant
to,
and Hawking
But
all you
inside
want.
time, there's necessity of an uncaused first cause.
But time is
And
created
that's-
with the universe and the Big Bang Theory, so therefore you
in
don't
the
need a
beginning-
cause out
In the
of it.
beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay,
That's
so
my-
your whole
that's my
answer
point of
is a
reference.
5,000-year-old book.
What I'm saying is there's an uncaused first cause, and that's exactly what Genesis describes, an uncaused first cause to start things.
okay.
And
Guys.
that it's
Yeah, we're
ordered to
kinda
the
dancing
degree,
off the page
and
here.
it's ordered to the degree of there's 900 different settings that are dialed exactly what they need to be dialed to within 1%, or we wouldn't be here.
Well, that's
If
good.
you want to propose there's 10 to the 500th other universes that aren't ordered that way, that's pure speculation. And Weinberg and Susskind both agree to that. Pure speculation on Hawking's part.
Okay.
So as far as what happened here afterwards, there's valid evidence that it didn't come together that way. I'll look up what you have to
so,
say,
sure.
and I'll find faults in it that are obvious. Because people like John Lennox don't.
Will you please just quit saying somebody's name and acting like you said something? Please say
People like
something
John
worth saying.
Lennox, I don't interrupt you. People like John
It's
Lennox.
'cause I don't
who's a
take 10 minutes to make a point.
Who is a Cambridge-educated mathematician, doesn't believe in Tooth Fairy or Santa Claus either. And your proposition here that I believe in some sort of a pumpkin monster is just,
I'm not saying that you
quite
believe in a
honestly,
pumpkin
Brad, it's
monster.
sarcasm. And
It
it's
is
not-
sarcasm, but that's the point.
I haven't resulted to sarcasm here.
But
You started it.
I am not
me.
talking about you specifically. I'm telling you that the information that you bring in when you just say an intelligent designer or an uncaused cause has no more validity in terms of reasonable structures than saying the great pumpkin outside the universe.
Not to your mind, it doesn't.
No,
but
it
does
doesn't.
other
Tell me what's the
people's
difference
minds.
between the two, other than you like one and not the other.
Because there's no creative power to a great pumpkin.
Really, there's a creative power to a magic uncaused cause?
Well, you say magic, I don't say magic.
Of course not,
That's
because
your-
that would
that's your
bother you.
description and it's
But that's the
sarcasm.
reality.
That's okay.
No, but that's the reality.
No, it's not.
Hey, guys, we're getting a little into the clock here, so
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I wanted.
Do you want to move on to the
Almost.
supernatural
almost.
realm?
I got one thing to say, and then we'll give this gentleman one more go. I'm going to go back to Hoyle.
Okay.
But trying not to generate a 10-minute discussion because we only have about 5 more.
We can both go 10 minutes each. You might make a
I know.
20-minute discussion.
Well, I need to correct you, Kelly, because
go.
you're
I'm
misinterpreting.
getting lots of it today, so that's okay.
Well, you're just
I'm ready.
misinterpreting what I said about Hoyle. So,
Well, actually, I wrote down what you said.
Yeah,
But go ahead.
go back and look at the tape. But basically, I was describing what Hoyle said, which
Uh-huh.
was the basically you can't create an airplane from a whirlwind kind of a thing. There's very long odds to create a cell, or in his case, it was like enzymes from inorganic matter. That's where he came up with a 10 to the 40,000 odds. And I won't argue with his math. He's a mathematician, so fine. The problem is that's not the question. His question is incorrect. We are not proposing that you start from nothing and go all the way to a complex thing that is that long odds. We are only proposing that we go a single step, which is from a nucleotide, 2 nucleotides together to 3 nucleotides as an example. And once you get these little tiny steps that are not improbable, then you apply selection pressures, solubility in the environment, the tendency to break down, the tendency for one to be stable, another not to be stable. So this whole argument about it takes long odds is not the question, even though so much of the argument is put around that. That's an inappropriate analogy to what we're actually.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. What do you foresee? What do you evaluate Fred Hoyle's equation to be? Because he's going from the first cell. And,
I just
and
said
I
it.
said
He
that.
is talking about going from an inorganic soup to.
No, that wasn't Fred Hoyle's argument. That's
He is going from inorganic chemicals to what it would take to create a complex enzyme. That's what his
That's
calculation
not what I
is
read
based
his
on.
argument to be. I read his argument first cell to humans.
All right, well, first cell is
Yeah.
even harder, so that makes the odds even higher. So that's fine. That's
Well,
not the issue.
Okay, that's what his evaluation is, and I'm just going by his evaluation.
Okay.
That's what you brought the question up as.
Look it up, but the
Yeah.
concept is what I'm after here, not the numbers. But his evaluation is incorrect because the question is the odds lie in what it takes to go from one step to the next tiny step. You don't have to go from 0 to 1,000,000. That's the odds that he's calculating. So, and I'd like Brad
Well-
to comment on this and see.
Okay.
Are you understanding
Well,
what I'm saying?
Hoyle wasn't unaware of Darwin's theory in 1945, which at their 50s somewhere, whenever he came up with this equation. He wasn't unaware
And-
of Darwin's slow process.
Yeah, and
He
that
wasn't
perhaps-
aware of that, and he took it into consideration.
That perhaps is why he went to that extreme. Anyways,
Well, the
I
slow
don't wanna
process
go-
is what
don't wanna
I
go
thought you
further
would
than
indicate, at
that.
least what I wrote down, was the slow process, but slow growth as an alternative. Hoyle took
Yeah.
that into account. That was Darwin's idea, and he was aware of that. Hoyle accepted that notion when he was doing his valuation. And again, I'm not saying that Hoyle was predicting how life would start. He wasn't. He was just saying from the first cell to humans. That was his
Yeah,
evaluation.
you're still missing the point, but I don't want to take.
But the
any more
slow
time,
growth
so-
thing, he took that into account. Anyway, I asked Brad because I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm not familiar with the intricacies of Hoyle's argument, all the details. I know that it involved combining lots and lots of things that, as Phil was saying, talking about selection pressure, meaning once you get one, the next one's easier. Meaning you're saying out of all the possible card hands, what are the chances of getting a royal flush? And I'm saying, no, once you lay down one card, the other cards have been altered because there's a different likelihood. Now there's only 50, how many cards in the deck? 52?
52.
Yeah, now there's only 51 cards to look at instead of 52 cards to look at. So the probabilities are different when you do this. The tRNA is a perfect example. If you're talking about putting a bunch of nucleic pieces together to make a tRNA, a bunch of little bits, bases, and you go, well, what's the probability of them randomly forming the 60 acid long structure? And you go, the probabilities are so remote because it's 60 acids long, there's so many ways to make them. But that's not really true, is it? There are only a few ways to combine the pieces. It's like puzzles with only a few connectors. There's only a few ways they work and a lot of ways they don't. So that cuts the probability space a lot. And my entire point is that I think that you can generate very, very reasonably. Very reasonably, the idea that we can go from randomness and still get to where we are. I would also further like to make the point that, and this is a really big one to me, this is one of the reasons I'm so skeptical of most of the contentions of things like intelligent design. Two things. One, there's no way to easily tell the difference between something that's intelligently designed versus something that's not. And I do this in my class. I have show me the intelligently designed thing. I'll show them things like Jesus in rust on the bridge in Chicago where water just randomly comes down and makes it. And you go, intelligently designed or random water formation? I show them the face on Mars where there's a bunch of rocks that look like it's a face. Randomly designed, or did God put rocks to look like a face? The point is that if there isn't an experiment to tell the difference between the two, you do not have a science. Science has to have a way to prove you false. Otherwise, you don't have a science. Now, more importantly, and to wit, my critical point, is that when we do science, I've seen hundreds of things in the last 400 years that were thought to be supernatural or magical or had some origin in whatever, God causing A, name whatever A you want. And now it's been shown to be not supernatural, cause-directed, or anything else. Can you name for me one thing anywhere, that has been shown to be, we thought was natural, that was later shown to be a supernatural thing? One, anything, because I can name 100 of them on my side.
I'm not with your question. Try it one
The
more
question
time.
is, I can name hundreds of things that were thought to be supernatural that are now proven to be natural. Can
By
you name for me
considered-
anything? Mental illness used to thought to be demons.
Considered to be
schizophrenia.
supernatural by who?
By the populace at large, by whoever's around. Jesus is casting out demons. I think it's mentally ill people. You know,
Actually,
people hear voices,
if
they go,
you're-
it's a demon. So no,
that's
it's
why I
not.
was trying to get you to specify, because the Bible doesn't say that.
Okay,
The
but
Bible
wait,
says
again.
that there is, in fact, you brought it up.
But you're ducking my
You brought
question.
it-
Tell me one thing that was we thought
You-
was naturally explained
Brad,
that has
you-
now been supernatural.
You brought up the condition.
But could
so
you answer
let
my
me-
question, please?
Let me give you the example. You're trying to bring up that the Bible depicts people as being mentally ill or demon-possessed as opposed to being ill. They have both.
Okay,
The
but you're
Bible
missing
depicts
my
people
point.
being ill, and the Bible predicts people being possessed.
But you're missing my point.
So, no,
Please show me
actually, I'm
one
answering
thing
your
that was
point.
natural, that we thought was naturally explained, that is now explained supernaturally. One thing.
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect was thought to be natural, and now you think it's
Yeah,
supernatural?
in the 12th century,
Scientifically?
in 12th century BC, people thought that the universe, for example, was static. It had always been here. Scientists for up until 1930 felt that the universe had always been here. Static state universe. I'm sure you're aware of it.
Sure.
Hoyle and Einstein both considered it. And once Hubble looked through his telescope and found out that the universe was expanding, that idea went away.
Sure.
But in the Bible, it's described both of them.
Wait a
I
minute,
know
but,
Phil disagrees
so
with
wait,
me,
you're
that's
telling
okay.
me that the steady
In the
state
Bible, it
universe used
said-
to be natural and now is supernatural?
No, what I'm saying is that idea was just disrupted by the Bible. The Bible has said in the beginning, since it was written, it said in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Up until 1930, that was not well proven. That was a static state universe, and I can understand why they did. They look up in the sky, Jupiter's at the same spot when they expect it to be, so's Venus and all the rest, the ones they could see. They're in the same spot where they're supposed to be, and I can understand why they might have thought that the universe was static, because they weren't aware that it's red-shifted. They weren't aware of that.
Sure.
But the Bible knew that.
The
7th
Bible doesn't
century
say,
BC.
if the Bible
Of course it
said
does.
the universe is expanding and has redshift, I'd be impressed. But you saying
Well,
God
of course,
created the heavens and the
redshift.
earth doesn't say anything at all about a Big Bang. Why couldn't God have created the heavens and the earth
it
as
said
it was?
it had a beginning. In the beginning.
Yeah, but that doesn't, you're really making a set of logical
no,
leaps
not.
here. Of course
Not
you
at
are.
all.
You
I'm
say,
saying
in,
it's a-
you're
I said
telling me
the-
that from the statement, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, you're going to infer then that shows that there's a Big Bang that's prescient of the Big Bang Theory.
No, I don't believe in the Big Bang Theory. But what I'm saying is that it does have a start.
You gotta
Just
be
like
kidding me. You don't believe in the...
No, it's got all kinds of errors with it, Brad.
Oh, sure, I'm just an astronomy
Multiple
professor.
errors.
What do I know? No, it
Well,
doesn't. No, it doesn't. Kelly, come on,
we're
man.
venturing into scientism again.
No, we're venturing into
I'm
science again, which
educated,
is where
you're
we
not,
should be
and-
talking
yeah,
about.
okay.
You can come take my astronomy class. We'll do the whole Big
I-
Bang Theory step by step.
Honestly, Brad, I'm
gotta
not
be
trying to be
kidding me.
sarcastic. I wouldn't take any of your classes.
Yeah, and that's
'Cause
okay because you wouldn't be a very good
viewpoint-
student
you
in
have
them
a
either.
viewpoint that you want to keep at.
No, I'm open
So-
to anything, but when you tell me I don't believe in the Big Bang Theory,
No, I don't, and there's
this
lots
is
of
what
people that
bothers
don't.
me about people of faith.
There's lots of people that don't, Brad, and I'll give you a list.
Yeah, there are lots of people being flat Earth too. It doesn't make them right.
Okay,
That's
I'm done.
insanity.
Let's
Me
move on
too.
to supernatural.
Yeah, I think we're done. Kelly, it's
think
been a
we are
real
done.
pleasure, man. You want these articles on left-handedness? Here's left-handed chirality. Here it is in meteorites.
I appreciate these 'cause
Here's
I
the
can look 'em up.
amplification of complexity. Here's the physical basis of asymmetry and chirality.
And could
Those
you
are all
write
reasonable
the,
articles in the last few years. They should have citations. at
one
the
last thing
bottom.
I'd ask,
Of
just
course.
write your email in there?
Yeah, of
So we
course.
can communicate?
Yeah.